You gonna sing?
No, you can't.
All right, you're up.
Good afternoon, everybody. The steering committee's come to order at 4 p.m., May 9th, 2019. Acceptance of the minutes. Has anybody had a chance to look at the past minutes?
Yes.
Because we need to, okay. So I'd like to have, any omissions or comments or anything with this? Or if not, I'd like to have a motion to accept it.
So moved.
Seconded?
First and second, all in favor to accept the minutes? Okay, minutes have been accepted. Okay, we're gonna review the updated draft of the project schedule. Bob?
Yep.
Yeah, I'll throw that up.
Everybody have a hard copy of that? Okay. What we did is, after the last meeting that we had, and then looking at the schedule, and as we had indicated.
We gotta get you a mic,
Oh.
better.
I should know better. He's always telling me I gotta get closer to the mic anyway. Anyway, we had that one conflict in terms of the date for the public visioning session, which has been kicked out. And I will go over that date in just a second, but that made some adjustments. The other thing, as we started looking at the schedule on this and looking at the stakeholder groups that are gonna be potentially involved in having some participation, we've decided to try and figure out how to do that in the most efficient way. And rather than doing as an interview, as the consultants interviewing each one of these groups, is to target an evening in which it would be with the steering committee, and that's gonna come into how many meetings we start talking about for the steering committee, to actually have them have one or two representatives from their various committees, put a little bit of something in writing. We'd establish what the format is, we'll get a draft of that for Lori to look at, and then we can get it to the committee so we can have an organized session with these various entities, have those steering committee meetings so the information is part of the public record, and they can ask questions, and then that way it gives us a better foundation from the various interest groups that you have without getting into a long, involved process of meeting with each one of these groups individually. And some of them, as Lori and I had a quick conversation, may have other areas of interest other than specifically their particular targeted interest group, but that involvement would be part of the overall public process, so when we have the other meetings, they'd be able to participate in those sessions. But this would really be focusing more toward what those various stakeholder groups are and what their interest is and how this plan moves forward. So in order to do that, we kind of looked at, and we're going to break out in terms of a targeting group. I tried to look at it from the perspective of what groups seem to make the most sense to work together. As an example, we had put together like the growth planning, the new housing trust, and the planning board from a land use perspective of what their interest would be as one entity for one evening. The business association, the Rotary, those seem to make more sense as an entity unto themselves. Some of the other ones, and it's only partly my experience, but not knowing the size of these committees in town, like the Cemetery, the Shade Tree Committee, Historical, Conservation Commission, you know, how they play off in terms of how much involvement they would have, whether or not putting a larger contingency of those folks on in one meeting would be adequate enough. So that's something I need to really sit down, I think, with Lori and Werner to get a better handle on how much interest these groups would have, so we can establish what that timeline would be. The department heads and, just lost my sheet. Department heads, KMS, the school, those would be independent. We would do those as the consultant, because really with the town staff, it's really issues at the municipal level. It's not so much that needs to be brought up as part of a public discussion, but all that information comes back to the steering committee anyway as part of the written documentation, and we'll be discussing that at that point. So it's really looking at these other smaller groups of how we can get them to the table, get their input, have their presence made and information made to you. And some of you folks knowing them, that may also stimulate some additional conversation amongst the steering committee that may not necessarily come out if we did it as independently meeting with some of these groups. So I think that's probably a sounder way to go. That being, hi Russ.
Yeah, I was gonna chime in real quick. It's super loud on my end. I had a request from the lighting committee to be added.
Okay. Okay.
So if we can, I know we're talking about schedule, but
Yeah.
we've gotten pretty deep into the stakeholder group.
Yeah.
So, after this agenda came out yesterday, I did hear from different people who were not on this list. And this was not meant to be, a list that was the end-all and be-all of every organization in town. I can tell you, resident groups and, other organizations we did not include. You know, this was a brainstorming session between Werner and I, in terms of we first started thinking of groups, organizations that might have a use for the property, that we might want to include and think about and engage. Or, you know, with growth planning committee and planning board, you know, what do they see coming down the pike? And, you know, what are things that they're seeing in their work that they think we should be aware of? You know, the PTA is, you know, a group with the school looking at what are our educational needs in the future. Is that something, or some connections or other projects, you know, what are those? The cemetery committee is really because we don't have an active cemetery in town, and we buy into the Arundel Cemetery, and so there has been some discussion as of late, do we need to plan for a new cemetery in town? You know, I don't know the answer to that. The Shade Tree has certainly had an interest in terms of, along with Conservation Commission, about conservation, or are there significant trees or areas that we should be thinking about? The Budget Board is just a group that's certainly engaged in the finances of the town, and so whether or not, you know, those might be. CHEMS is included because, certainly they are, using space at the fire department, and we're looking at our 4 fire stations and what's the future of that. And, CHEMS would need a home. And so we're doing a municipal facility needs study for fire and right now. And, you know, would CHEMS be a part of that? Graves and Cape Porpoise Library, we put down again, just because they're connected to other sorts of people, not that I've heard that they necessarily have a physical need. You know, the Rotary falls in that same category, and Historical Society, and some of those were groups we heard people bring up in terms of communication. So it doesn't, so I wanna say, because people, I think, have a concern that they're not gonna have a chance to be heard, or that they're not gonna have a chance to have input. And the public visioning session, and these public kickoff meetings, and other, future meetings of this committee, to me, are all about the public having input, and the public coming in and sharing their ideas. And so I don't want people thinking, if they're not on this list, that it means that they would be cut out from that. You know, the lighting committee brought up that they should have been on the list because of a lighting ordinance. I'm not sure that they need a stakeholder interview, because the lighting committee's ordinance isn't necessarily gonna change because of this particular parcel, but maybe a broader issue. I heard from, you know, Kennebunkport Residents Association, and, you know, I think that they're a group, again, we're not going to interview the entire group, we would have 1 or 2 people representing the group, but I didn't put down other resident association groups or things. So there's not right or wrong answers, but it's about the right mix
Right.
and where people fit in that public process. And so I just wanted to talk about that, because I did tell people, you know, this was a list of ideas, it wasn't, you know, set in gold. But what the committee thinks is the right amount of input and where that input should be. Because what are we really, maybe you could talk about what you see we're really trying to accomplish with the stakeholder interview versus the rest of the public process.
With the stakeholder groups, it's when they have a specific interest. I mean, you know, the growth planning, I mean, that's more, falls into the planning aspect. They've been working on how they see growth in the community. So there are specific issues that, you know, we would need to want to have brought to the forefront. Those are targeted, specific interest. You know, you get into, you know, I'm not putting the cemetery and the shade tree and historical and that sort of thing into a different category. They probably have interests that wouldn't necessarily drop up, pop up to the planning level for what we're looking at here, but there's still things that should be identified. Whether they influence the master plan, at least the documentation is, okay, this is a specific issue that as the property gets developed, these are things that should be considered, but they won't necessarily drive the master plan itself. But it gives you the master plan, which is your tool at the end of how to develop the property. It's identified these things so that when you take that next step, then they come out to be heard. Why did you hear me the first time? This way you've got the documentation in place that you can start looking at it. So that's the role I see.
And I think you brought up a good point that, there may be written interviews that we do with people to get all their input, and there are those who we might want oral interviews with. And if we are gonna present certain information so that everybody has the same grounding
Right.
to provide input, whether that's important or necessary, and I'd like to hear what the committee's thoughts are on that. Because at the end of the day, we can't interview everybody.
Right.
And what about the general public? How, that's a really big question. I mean, I'd like to see them to be assured that they're gonna be reassured that they're gonna be able to have some say in all this.
Oh, definitely, and I think part of that is, since this is being broadcast, and there are obviously members of the public that are here, that we define in terms of the steering committee, dedicating a certain number of minutes per, when we have these meetings, to address specifics on the agenda to allow the public to be able to interact.
Well, today
And-
I'm gonna go ahead and take 15 minutes towards the end if we can.
Sure.
Which would be 5:30 to 5:45, and I know that we have a selectmen's meeting at 6 o'clock, so I'd
Yeah.
like, if there's anybody here that would like to talk
Right.
or ask some questions,
Yeah.
they'll at least have 15 minutes today, because I promised last time we could be able to do that.
Yeah, no, I think that's reasonable, because, if you're gonna have the public that's gonna come listen to the sessions, or they're watching it, they wanna come back, or, we're talking about being able to set up a dedicated email as part of the webpage that people can actually put questions or comments up that we can be able to pull off, and we can address those as they become available. So bringing it to the committee, ones that are relevant to specific answers, or, these can be addressed at such a time. So that way, the public will have that continuum of being able to participate. And of course, that first visioning introduction to the public, there'll be the opportunities for the public to participate. And then obviously the visioning session, that's the biggest one, in terms of the public participation in the process. We're really starting to get into how the site actually can be used, visioning what those particular type uses are and how they may fit onto that parcel. And then that basically becomes a 3-day session, and I'm done jumping all over in the schedule. But that session basically becomes one where we, as the consultants in the morning, start off with kind of a broader overview, an overview of the types of items and uses that were identified during the first, public interview session, process. And then starting to put some ideas out there in terms, as an example, we may show a village design idea in terms of images of architecture, and not necessarily a plan that says this is how it's gonna be built, to see how people would wanna integrate that as an idea onto the site. Where might it work? Or people looking at the site saying, I think this is an ideal spot for us to put, a senior affordable housing project, So those are the type things. So we'll provide some basis for people to work with in the morning session. Then the afternoon session, we'll break out, and people will be able to break out into tables. And that's something we're still strategizing on, how to break out the tables, whether we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, so we don't wind up with a group of people that are focused on one aspect, but we can get kind of a broader perspective of getting different interest groups at the different tables to have that dialogue, which we think is probably the better way to do it, than rather than having one design that gets focused around one idea. So that's the direction. And then the consultant team is gonna work the following 2 days, wherever we decide to have it, whether it's here, whether we have it at the school. And we'll be on site working on the concepts based on the input that comes out of that Saturday visioning session. And we'll have the doors open, so the public wants to keep, come in, see where things are going, comment, see what's happening, make additional comments. And then we'd wrap up everything on Monday evening, where we'd be done with what we come up with as the first preliminary visioning plan for the use of the property itself.
Okay,
Okay?
yeah, good, thank you,
So that way that public process is open, that people can just come in as they,
good.
Yeah.
Hopefully it gets advertised well.
yeah, which becomes part of the webpage setup, and that's part of that other document that we put in. So, based on that, in terms of, as Mike said, what's the steering committee's involvement gonna be, and trying to figure out meeting-wise, just looking at those interview process, those various stakeholder groups, I've targeted 4, 6, 7 meetings in addition to, like, the public visiting session, and then the first introductory visioning session, and then the visioning Saturday weekend event, as target times to be able to meet with the steering committee that will take some of this public input at those meetings, as well as there would be an update progress on the information that we've collected to this point, including whatever information winds up on the website that we can glean down. So they'll be able to go through that information as we move forward, and then into that first visioning session. And then after that, we'll be coming back to go over the plans, and then that's where we start tweaking things in terms of what those visions are.
And these meetings are all gonna be held at 4 o'clock.
That's the open
Okay.
question, that's what we thought it was gonna be, but, that's part of the dialogue in which way you wanna handle it. 4 o'clock works well for us, in terms of holding them, so. And Thursdays, if that's the best day as well, we're flexible to make that schedule work, if that works for everybody.
How about all you guys? Does 4 o'clock work?
It's fine for me, yeah, it's fine.
Works for me, depending on the day, and the weekend, but usually I can do
Oh, I got a question
Yeah.
for Bob. Bob, do you have already in your mind's eye or something concrete, some sort of template that will allow us to eventually prioritize and or categorize all the different points of people's interests, from conservation to infrastructure to architecture to zone to whatever that is, so that as we take notes from the public or whatever steering, whatever group, we begin to put it into a way with which we can collect empirical data that we can look at and say, well, there's 30 people from all around the town have said the same thing, sort of, versus, so just, I don't know, I'm just curious.
We can work something out like that, I think.
Okay.
Okay.
So can we just go over, just discuss the exact dates for all of these meetings? That would be helpful for me.
The red dots?
Yeah, all the red dots.
And again, I threw those timeframes out there for discussion today, as
Okay.
we're just pointing out, just so we can get them on the table in terms of what works for everybody. I mean, some of them could be 2 weeks in a row. I've kind of broken them out, separated them by a week or two in between, just thinking timeline for people's commitment, as well as getting, the notifications out there for the various groups to be able to have their own meetings, to put their information together to come before you. So.
Warren, if you're gonna talk, why don't you use that microphone, just turn it on for me. All right.
Got it. Thanks.
So that second week in May really is this meeting that we're having right now. So the fourth week would be the 23rd.
So that was a question that I had, because we have the public site walk on the 30th
Right.
that's on there. So I didn't know if those were the same day or if that was separate from this.
That's separate.
Okay.
So the second dot in May is the 23rd.
The second dot in May, let's see,
Steering committee.
fourth week,
Row.
which would be the 23rd.
The 23rd?
And these are always gonna be on Thursdays now.
Well,
Well,
we're
we're just-
discussing
Yeah,
that.
we're working on it.
So if Thursdays are bad, then tell us.
The next one is,
Okay.
but I could do Tuesday, Wednesday,
Thursday's
if it works
a
for
good day
everyone
me.
else.
I'm
What's
also
that?
unavailable
Thursday's a
on
good
the
day for me.
23rd.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna be here on the 23rd either.
Well, that settles it.
Just leave the door open.
22nd?
So
Yeah,
what
we'll
are we
push all the
hoping to
buttons.
do at the next meeting? Or what would be the purpose of it?
Well, the next meeting, I would like to start with identifying the first group of stakeholders to be able to participate.
How about
Input.
next Thursday, the 16th?
That doesn't give you a lot of time to notify these stakeholder groups to,
So when you say identify, so we're gonna start interviewing people, you're saying, or,
we're gonna bring them to the table to have a conversation with them about what their specific,
okay.
yeah.
Couldn't we do two at a time?
Oh, you're gonna, as an example, when I talked about the first one, doing growth planning, the housing trust and the planning board as an example.
all come
All
together.
three at the same time.
Okay.
You know, and we dedicate a block of the meeting time, giving them parameters, you know. This is the time we have allotted to address it, giving them kind of a cue card to put stuff in writing that may not necessarily get discussed that night, but also then to have talking points that they wanna talk to. Because there's information that, you know, if we have everybody come in and Russ is
So-
not there, that
So how about Tuesday and Wednesday of that week? How does that work?
Which week?
The 21st and 22nd.
I'm not here the 18th and 19th.
But
So-
you're here the 21st and 22nd.
So the 21st,
I'm
Yep.
in-
so
May.
growth
I'm in May.
planning,
Okay, never mind.
growth planning will already be
Okay,
here
I'm good.
okay,
on the 21st
okay.
at 7.
yeah.
You know, so, you know, with enough notice, you know,
What
we
days
could,
did you say?
we could either do it
21st,
right at that meeting with them,
Yeah.
or we
Tuesday,
could try to do it a little bit.
Yeah,
I
You
should
know, I
be
could
okay.
reach out to them, see if we could get them here at 6,
Yeah.
you know, as an example, so.
So if the meetings are gonna run 4 to 6, I was talking about having them here during the steering
Okay,
committee meeting.
all right.
That way,
But, so that would be a, I mean, that would be a, you know, a logical one for growth
Yeah,
planning.
okay.
is that the
Or we
21st?
For the
could make it
21st.
5 to 7
Yeah.
then, if that works.
that's flex, you know, we're flexible with the
Yeah.
hours.
So how about the 21st?
That's fine with me.
Good for
Yes?
me.
Tuesday, 21st.
No.
Sorry, but if that's okay.
How about the 22nd?
Either.
Yeah, I can make that work, yeah.
I'm out of the country the whole.
Oh, you're out of the
Sorry.
country the whole week.
Yeah.
So,
Either one's good for me.
21st,
Either one.
Yeah, I'm fine.
you said you're here. Werner, you're always here, right? Jamie?
Just like it.
No, I had to run 21st, 22nd.
Both work for me.
Oh, yeah.
And our consultant, it's important you're here.
Oh,
And
well,
Michael Davis, you're gonna be here, right?
Oh,
You won't be here that whole week?
I'm gone for 2 weeks, I'm going out of the country.
Oh, well, you
leave
and
the directions
Rebecca,
on
huh?
As for work.
Don't forget about Russ.
It's not as much fun.
And Russ, what about you? He's good.
He's all
He's
set.
good. Okay,
So we would need
5:21.
someone else to videotape.
I'll talk to Mark.
Okay, good. So do we like the 21st then, because growth planning committee's coming in already?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would work.
And
So the next.
So
meeting is
maybe we
next-
would be at 5
Yeah, 5.
instead,
Yep,
5 o'clock?
5 to 7?
5 to 7.
I have a question on the stakeholder meetings. Will we be asking these various groups to identify no more than 2 representatives to speak on their behalf, or could potentially, you know,
That would be the intent.
a 25-person committee all show up and have
Exactly.
opinions?
You know, Werner and I had a brief conversation about that, is having these committees identify who would be their spokesperson primarily.
Yeah.
But then also what their concerns or questions may be, to put those in writing as well, so that we can, at least if we can't capture it all at the same time, just in terms of people talking,
Sure.
obviously, that would at least have some written documentation and one spokesperson talking. That's what I was saying, having the committee have at least a little bit of a heads-up time.
So they can poll their own members too,
Correct.
sort of.
Right, so I
Yeah.
think it would be helpful to though just, what is information that the steering committee would like to get from these stakeholder groups? So that we had some questions we could give everybody, and maybe the questions are different depending on the group, but, you know, is there certain material or answers you're looking for from everyone?
So is the point on the 21st to take a set of stakeholders? So then we're gonna have several more sets of stakeholders.
Correct.
Yes.
We might get a few sets, I don't know, we might get a couple in anyway.
And why are we doing it at 5 and not 4?
So the only reason to do it at 5 is because growth planning committee, we were hoping to get that night, and they meet at 7.
Oh, so you will lead into it, okay.
Okay. And we can do is, you know, Werner and I and Lori can sit down and try and, so I'm a little bit more familiar with some of these stakeholder groups and where their interest base is, and we can try and formulate some questions in a format and send that, and then it can go out to the committee to comment on and get that back. So
But we
can
don't have
form-
much time between now and the 21st.
Well, I guess the question I'm gonna have is if we put something together and have it to you by Monday morning, that can be distributed to the committee to look at and see if they have any questions in terms of the criteria we're establishing for these groups, either add to it or subtract to it, and then we can put a final format together, rather than having to wait another meeting, have another meeting to
Right,
review
right.
those.
I think that's fine as long as, like the growth planning committee, for example, won't meet again until their meeting on the 21st.
Right,
So we would need to give them a heads up so that they could get input from
Right.
other committee members.
Yeah.
But if there are certain things that this committee is looking for, it would be helpful before we draft these questions.
Yeah.
Well, I got a question about this whole thing, if we're gonna meet with stakeholders, I mean, when we meet with them,
Yeah.
not if, when we meet with them. There's nothing out there right now that, to any of the stakeholders or even to the committee, other than the walkthrough and so forth, to say what is possible, on that piece of property.
mhm,
Today, you know, when we walked it, we've got those lots that are very narrow on one
Mhm.
end and so
Right.
forth, and then we've got some big, nice open areas and so forth. And we're gonna have people with a lot of good ideas. But how do we say, hey, yeah, that's a good idea, but it doesn't fit? I mean, I just don't wanna get into that kind of thing. I wanna,
right.
somewhere along the way, you know, we've gotta know what's possible. I mean, and where it's
Is there a
possible.
fact sheet they all could be sent in advance, sort of a frequently asked questions to this point of, here's what we know so far, just a cheat sheet for folks that may already, you know, be at the very starting point of this, so that they're coming into it one step ahead and we're not fielding a
Right.
lot of
Mhm.
questions that, you know,
There's some baseline
some
information.
baseline
right now.
information, yeah.
Well, what I can do, you know, and not, you know, put it out there that all of a sudden it's preconceived that this is how it's happening.
Right.
Is
No,
based on what
exactly.
we just
Yeah,
talked about,
yeah.
is
Right.
the road alignment, the main road, not the
Right.
cul-de-sacs, you know, pretty much is constrained by environmental and
Exactly.
lot
Right.
width. So showing that, and then taking what I did, I left it in the car, you know, when I marked on that plan, showing where the setbacks were, what was upland area, what is wetland. We can put a composite together that would at least give people an
I think that would be-
understanding.
I think that'd be
Yeah.
really helpful.
Yeah, we can do that.
Do you
Just
think it'd be,
outline areas and say, this is a possible development area and it's X acres.
Yeah,
do you think it's possible that we should take out the cul-de-sacs?
Yes.
out of the
Oh, I
plan?
would.
Because it's
Absolutely.
not, it's gonna confuse everybody.
exactly, that's why I said we'd drop those out.
Okay.
The only thing we'd leave in is the corridor, the main roadway.
Yeah,
line.
and,
And just put little circles of where.
you still have the diagonal lines in and so forth of where.
I'll figure somehow to make it
Somehow do that.
clearer. I mean, that was,
Yeah.
before the last sidewalk, all of a sudden I was just trying to figure out how I could make people understand what was out there.
And then-
Magic marker worked well.
And the second thing, I wanted to follow up on what Jamie said. I have an idea, a feeling that a lot of people are gonna come in with a lot of the parts of the same recommendations and stuff, da-da-da.
Right.
And I'm going along with Jamie, and looking at the schedule,
Yeah.
you know, what will the filtering process be? And how does that work? I understand the visioning sessions and
Yeah.
all that, I understand all that.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the way, somebody's gonna say, no, we're not gonna do that, we're not gonna do this, and how does that get, once we come into the visioning session, how does that get filtered?
Well, in terms of collecting all that information, the idea is hopefully what we're looking at is bringing that to the table during the visioning session. You know, if someone comes in with an idea that they want to put in X for development, and then they start looking at the site and going, X not gonna fit there because
Yeah.
land mass wise, it takes too much land to do that, you know? Or, you know, if they've got some grandiose configuration that they think might work, how do you fit it into the site? Here are the locations where something like that may fit. So it's basically, we've gotta take the comments that come back through to us, and then to be able to try and document some of that stuff. And that's what we're gonna try with the webpage, is to keep updating information as it comes through. So, in the perfect world, we'd have the entire town cloistered for 3.5 months,
Yeah.
and full of Snicker
Yeah.
bars and something like that.
Yeah, my only, my concern in this whole thing was the first week in October.
I know.
Yeah, that was the whole thing, because lot to do, you know, lots to filter out.
Well, I guess I'll throw this out on the table, only having done this as long as I have as professionally, and then having done it in my own community. Sometimes timeframes wind up getting pushed out a little bit,
Yeah,
so.
tell me about it.
But
So-
it raises the question of whether we want to, as a committee at some point, say, here are the broad areas that we expect to utilize the parcel for. Affordable housing, community needs, this is gonna be development area. I mean, at some point, we've gotta give some parameters when we're asking the people to come in and talk to us, that we're not just gonna say, okay, anything goes.
I got a feeling that it's gonna be, I wouldn't wanna put words into people's mouths, I'd like to see what they have to say. But I have a feeling that, I still feel that it's gonna come in, there's gonna be not
Yeah.
200 ideas, there's gonna be
Group of,
a narrower, that's my feeling anyway. I mean, you talk to people, talk to people in town, it just feels that way. I could be wrong, maybe, there's gonna be an Irving station in there or something.
Russ, did
Russ,
you?
do you have something?
Yeah. I think an important component to share is that the parcel exists in 2 zones. So there's some parameters there, and sharing those might help, those with ideas frame those. So we're in village residential and free enterprise, 2 very different zones.
The point I was gonna try to make, in my vision for having acquired 87 acres of land, was for the town to own a property so that in the future, I'm not looking to develop this entire piece of property. I don't, that was not my vision. My vision was that the town owned some property that should we need a walk-in clinic in the year 2040, we would have a piece of property to use. So I don't know about anybody else. It sounds like we're looking to develop this 87 acres. That was not my vision.
No, that's,
Yeah.
our last meeting,
Yeah, I know, I wasn't here.
We discussed that,
Yeah.
and we
Agreed.
all agreed to
Okay.
that, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely.
And I had asked the question of whether we expect to get is the $10 million a sunk cost? Or is it we looking to get some of the money back?
Oh, yeah,
That's
yeah.
So I think Lori answered that question pretty well. So I think that what you're saying is the way that we're looking at it.
Good, good.
I think we need to, as we move forward, as we think about uses, I mean, we've got to identify ones that are politically desirable, for instance, physically possible, and then financially feasible, and that's an iteration back and forth among all those 3. And we can't just assume that something, because it's desirable, will necessarily fit, or that will be financially feasible. And we need that constant checking back in to make sure it meets all the criteria.
Does the town have any sort of, I know there was a survey that went out recently that I took part in and many other people did, sort of a 5-10-year visioning plan that also has given us some backup information so that we can show, based on that and the other input, but we have other, people that filled those things out may say, well, I once put in a lot of input about what I felt for the town at large, not just this property, but that we can also kind of take a look at? I don't know if we have results from that survey that went out about planning and housing needs and other things that a lot of folks answered apparently.
Yes, so growth planning is actually going to be presenting kind of the highlights of those survey results on
Oh,
the
good.
23rd.
Oh, good. Okay.
At the Board of Selectmen's meeting, so.
Great.
And that should be, I mean, that'll be televised, we'll have it as a PowerPoint that's available and all that, so, yep.
Great.
So just to jump in on the topic of online surveys, I know we discussed this a little bit last time, in sort of.
You need a mic.
Oh, sorry about that, sorry.
Thanks.
Just to jump in on the idea of the online surveys, that we talked about last time, them not being necessarily as effective, as the paper surveys, but if we're looking for a way to categorize the information and to really collect as many voices as possible on the various opportunities that we see for the land, including not developing it right away, Google Forms would be a really easy, free, and effective way to collect that information from not only the stakeholder group representatives, but every member of those stakeholder groups and more members of the town, if we could do that. And it would organize it for you pretty quickly, and we could see, sort of get a tally of where people fall on those various ideas that are out there, as well as include opportunities for them to write in different ideas. So just as a solution idea for collecting, since it organizes it for you.
Okay, we can take a look at it.
So, I mean, that, I think that is something we struggle with, because people do respond better to hard copy in this community, but then the data collection of it afterwards is always a challenge. But if we think about that in terms of whether we want a survey or not, or how we collect this data, and, we could categorize, so if we have the stakeholder interviews, for example, we could offer to those stakeholder groups, go out and fill the form out online as X group. And then we could also advertise it to citizens, do you know what I mean? I think that there's a lot of citizens who would not feel comfortable doing it online, but if we are doing community outreach in other ways and had a computer set up and could help people or assist, we might, we had the libraries involved, for example, we might have a better chance at it. The other thing I just throw out in terms of looking down the road is we do send out the tax bills usually in July, and maybe that'll be a little late, but it's probably middle to late July. But if we are going to do that, I can send out a two-sided piece of 8.5 by 11 without really additional cost to the committee. And so whatever that might be, whether it's an update or whether it's a survey or whatever it may be, I just need to know that about a month in advance.
So you need to know in the middle of June.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay?
I think, Roy, that'd be a great marketing idea. Both for information gathered and information that's not yet been gathered, and the direction where people can go to either find it out or give their opinion and deliver that information.
Yeah, what we found with the paper surveys is that, just in terms of the practicality, there was cost with the postage, and kind of dealing with those mechanics, but where we really saw a lot of time spent was when all that data came in, then, we had to have someone who just punched it all in, and so there was a lot of, there's a lot of time spent there as well. But
What was the percentage of the returns? Was it a third or?
I want to, I don't remember.
Rental, what did we get back, 500 surveys?
But yeah, well, no, I think we got more than that.
750?
Yeah, somewhere along.
750, and we sent out,
Something like
probably
that.
2,600?
Yeah, probably somewhere in that neighborhood.
Pretty good return.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty good return, actually.
Yeah.
Warner or Bob or Lauren, could I see at our next meeting, is it possible that we could see, and Russ brought up a very good point, that this parcel is divided in two zones. Certainly, the majority of it is in the village resident, is that what it's called, village?
Yeah.
Village residency zone.
Well, actually, no, that's the other way around. So
The-
most of it, the majority is in the free enterprise zone. So-
That's
Thank you.
the dividing line for
So
the
the
village
power line
residential is
divides
the
it?
power line. So this is village residential, and that's your free enterprise.
Right.
All right, so the list would be what's allowed in both of those, either one of those two zones? So as an informational thing, and if there's something that shows up in people's comments that it's not allowed in either one of those, then the option would possibly be a contract zone, which is another direction to go, and
I mean, you know, from a planning perspective, this piece is large enough, I mean, it could just, even without having to go through a contract zone, this could be its own zoning district in and of itself.
as long as that goes along with comprehensive planning.
Right. Yep.
And so that could be a question that code planning says, this is all great, however, where are we with this? And I'm,
Well, I
starting from
mean-
that direction.
Practically speaking, 2012, we had no idea that this
That's
was
right.
a possibility, so. But I think we'll,
Were you working on that comp plan now,
Right.
right?
yes, so we're working on the RFP, for the 2022 update for the comp plan. And so we'll probably be, the hope is that we'll be starting on that in September. So right as we're ending this process, we'll be starting, we'll be starting comp plan update.
Good. It falls into place.
Never a dull moment.
Nothing.
It seems out your ear all the time.
You can bring your nap, you can bring your bed over here if you want.
Okay, so let's focus on the dates again.
Yeah,
Okay,
I was
let's
gonna
go.
say, we got one date.
So yeah,
Yeah, one day.
so that's got May, so now we want June.
Tuesday, the 21st, right?
Yep.
So we got 3 weeks, second week of June. You wanna target your Thursdays, or look between Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or 11th, 12th,
So we're
13th?
talking like the 13th of June?
11th, 12th, or 13th?
Thursday that worked.
Well, we have a selectmen's meeting, so
So you're committed.
I'm committed
That's right.
anyway.
So are we thinking the 13th, or does
Yep.
that date not work for people?
13th is fine.
Russ says no.
Ross says no. Ross, you told me you had no more commitments after this.
I'd rather.
25th anniversary in Ireland.
Oh.
That's a
I
priority.
can't say no to that.
So is that week out for you in total, Russ?
Yeah, yep. Following week is great though.
What about the 6th and the 20th? If we're not, because we won't have met since the 21st of May, and that's the stakeholder meeting.
So what do we think about June 6th?
I'll be gone,
Who's gone? Jamie?
I'll be gone.
The whole week?
You're gone.
I'll be gone the full week of June.
Okay.
Okay, so how about the second week?
Russ's can't be there the second week.
Yep, I heard him.
Yeah.
You're not here either?
13th doesn't work for me either.
13th doesn't work for you either. So,
Yeah, here we go.
is there a date that's better that week? Yes?
For me, any day other than.
Any other day. So we would be missing Russ and Tim if we met that week.
I'm here.
11th,
Tuesday the 11th?
Tuesday the 11th.
So it looks like Tuesday's working better for us than
Yeah.
Thursdays.
Wow.
So what are we thinking? June 11th?
Yep.
Yep.
At 4?
June 11th at 4?
I have a meeting at 5, but I might, but I maybe could work that out,
Okay.
so,
So-
Last,
So then the next meeting is what?
the last week of June, which is the week of the 24th.
So who's here on that week? Yes? Yes? Yes?
I'm here to January 1st.
Okay, good.
So here I go.
Thursday and Friday of that.
Russ is okay.
Ouch.
You're not here Thursday and Friday, the 27th, 28th,
Right.
but you're here
I'll
the
be
rest of the
gone
week.
Thursday.
I'm not here on the
Yeah.
26th.
I'll be gone Thursday, Friday.
But you're here the 24th and 25th.
Yes.
That's 6 months before Christmas.
Yep.
24.
25th is.
But you're here the
That's
25th.
Tuesday, the
25th.
25th.
Tuesday the 25th.
Tuesday,
So
the
how about
25th.
you peeps over here? 25th?
Yep,
Sounds fine.
25th,
4
Okay.
o'clock, right?
Going once, going once.
sold.
I think Russ gave a thumbs up there a minute ago, so.
Yes, he did.
Tuesday,
He's
the
looking kinda pale.
25th.
Looks like Tuesday's.
Yep.
I have 4.
Whoever thought of Thursdays, huh?
That was crazy.
Yeah, right. My money's not on Thursday anymore.
Okay, how about July?
That's true.
All right, so in July, so we've got that group on the public visioning, that's the 13th through the 15th.
Right.
Right.
So do we need to meet before then, Bob, or what are you thinking? I think I've heard back from everybody that that first weekend you gave, the 13th.
The 13th is
the
gonna work.
best. Yeah.
Okay. So let's hold that
So,
for the visioning session.
Yeah,
And what date is that?
July 13th and 14th, the 12th, 13th and 14th, I think.
12.
Yeah.
weekend, right?
So would it make
Right.
sense for us to meet after that then, to then
Yeah.
have that input? Yeah.
Right.
So that
Sometime.
includes us that whole weekend?
Well, it's not really the whole weekend. What do you,
Now, basically, Saturday is the open vision session for the public to participate. The consultants are gonna be working Sunday and Monday, so the public is welcome to come in
So
at
July
various
13th.
times to see where things are going, comment and ask questions. People who could
No,
not make the
Saturday.
Saturday session would have the
Saturday.
opportunity to come in.
so everybody should commit Saturday, July 13th.
Yes.
All right, so then when do we want to meet? Do we want to meet directly after that meeting, or you want another week, or what?
I would think another week so we can kind of formalize some stuff.
So you're thinking the week of July 22nd?
Yep.
So how does that week look for people?
So far, so good.
The summer's almost over. I hope you enjoyed it.
Jesus.
Right. 23rd looks good,
Yeah,
23rd?
okay.
25th's a Tuesday.
Yeah.
I know.
I have a dentist appointment.
23rd.
It's not a
Russ is
golf-
good. Okay, so
it's not a golf day.
7:23 at 4 PM.
So 7:13 and 7:23, not the 14th or 15th.
And what
But
time
you're
is-
free to come in all you want on the 14th or 15th,
Yeah, I'll
but
be
you are
in
not
Iceland,
required.
thank you.
What time on the 13th?
4 o'clock?
I think it was like.
think
On the
it's
13th, it's
I
gonna
didn't
be in
get
the
the full
morning.
schedule.
Yeah, it's in
Yeah.
the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
that's
an
a
all-day.
9,
Yeah, this is,
that's
9
a-
o'clock.
that's a 9 to noon.
I had one somewhere, yeah, I did get one, but.
9 to noon.
We'd
Okay.
start with refreshments at 8:30, coffee, people would come in and kind of look at stuff, but really kick off.
Okay, so then after that, we're meeting in August.
That Mr. Page over there.
Yes.
Here's the whole schedule for that.
Just
day.
once in August.
This is one I printed at home, so I think. we
And
can
that,
get
I guess, the
in
question I'm
place.
gonna throw out there is sometimes it's hard to project out, you know, with what happens between data collection and that visioning session. We may wanna throw another meeting in there because there's so much information to go through. But with this start, I just tried to figure out what I thought was reasonable timeframes.
I think it's good to get dates on people's calendars.
So
And
do you
then-
want it scheduled 2 in August, and then we can adjust those as need be?
I'd
do-
rather have them on people's calendar than try
Okay.
to get them in later.
So what if we do let's see,
So are we looking at the second week in August?
yeah, if we look at the second week of August, the week of the 12th, well,
So the second week to me is really the week of the 5th.
yep, I just noticed I was looking at
How does Tuesday, August 6th look for people?
I'm good.
Good.
Tuesday, August.
I can probably do it.
Tuesday, August 6th?
I think I can do that.
So, is
No.
that good for you, Russ?
47, right?
Is there a
Okay.
day that week better?
Yeah, 4 to 6.
You gotta stay in this country once in a while. you know? Oh, wow. All right, well, let's stick with Tuesday, August 6th, because we're not sure we're gonna need it
Yeah.
anyway, but
At 4?
8/6 at 4. And so then what would we do
week of the 19th.
the week of the 19th of August? So how does Tuesday, August 20th look?
Good,
Good.
so far.
All right. Okay.
I know. And all your relatives tell you they're coming
Well, you
for a
just
week
tell
in the
them
summer.
to cook
why
dinner
Tuesdays
while
are
you're at the meeting.
That's why
And
Tuesdays
then-
Just don't open the door.
And then what about September?
Third week in September, is that what we're
Yeah,
saying?
Are we
Are you
looking
gonna
at
have
two
two?
meetings in September or one?
I would say one.
Okay, and you're thinking what, between the second and third week?
Yeah,
So maybe the 17th of September?
seems,
That would be 1 month prior to your final.
mhm.
Good.
Do you think you need the 17th or the 10th?
Is the,
What was this other thing in September? The master plan presentation that's on there, what's the date
Yeah.
for that?
17th?
Is that the 17th?
Oh,
That's in October, he's got.
Yeah.
Oh, I have it on September. on my
Well,
calendar.
there's a final, there's a presentation of the,
One to the
there is a
public
presentation of
and
the
then one
master
to the
plan for
selectmen.
final public comment, and that's between the second and third weeks of September. And that's just a,
So maybe we should have it on the,
Is the end date the
Latter
first week
part
in
of the third.
October a contractual date? No?
So one thing about a public meeting at night is the availability of this room.
Mhm.
So it would be available on the first or third Thursday of the month. And it would be available the second Wednesday of the month, yes? No, or is it fire training?
That would, yeah, yeah, we sometimes have fire.
So Mondays are another night we could have availability, but otherwise it's pretty booked in here. So do we wanna do a public presentation on September 10th? This final master plan presentation? Or what are we thinking?
Will we have that by then?
I don't know.
I'd almost rather push it out to the third week of September.
I mean, so the 17th, you know, again, because growth planning is always on that calendar, this room's always free, and they typically only meet once a month anyways, so,
So the 17th, you could tell the growth planning they're coming to our meeting?
sure.
Okay, so do we wanna put it in for 9/17?
Yep, at 7 o'clock or 6
What
o'clock,
time?
or
7?
do it at an evening,
Whatever,
Yeah,
You know, what's the timing on
7.
that?
What works best
Do we
for,
want 7? 7 or 6?
Six.
Either one?
what works best for the public showing
Some
up?
people like 6, some people like 7.
I
We
like
could do
six.
6:30,
Doesn't
we
matter to
could cut the mustard.
6 is okay, it doesn't matter to me.
Why don't we say 6:30?
6:30.
So that way no one will be happy. 6:30,
That's September 19th?
September
17th.
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 Yeah.
And then I would think we would do the final presentation to the Board of Selectmen at one of their normal meetings.
And those meetings are?
So they're the second and fourth Thursdays.
Thursdays?
The
Yeah.
10th or the 24th.
So I'm in October now, right?
Yep.
So that would be either October 10th or October 24th.
Do you want to leave
And
wiggle
I
room
I
in there
won't-
to Mike's point about October 1st, the first week in October? Where we're trying to set dates. I mean, I'm flexible enough as far as that's concerned, but,
I won't be here October 24th.
okay?
October 10th.
October
And
10th?
I'm not planning to be here October 10th either.
Oh, don't blame you.
I haven't told my board yet, though.
Maybe you just did.
I guess the whole month of October, we're having an interim manager. I don't know. Do we want to do the first one in November? If we're looking to like give leeway, I mean, I don't have to be here for the presentation.
So you don't want to have a meeting in November at all? I mean, October at all?
I don't know, I'm just asking.
Okay.
I think it's hard to see that far down the road. If people could put on their calendar 10/10 and 10/24, as two possible presentation
With a
dates.
question mark.
Just so you know, those are the dates.
Okay.
4 to 7.
We could do it on the odd Thursday, which would be October 17th, but I would have to haul my selectmen in for that.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
10, 10, and 10/24, and that would be 7. What time is the?
Six.
6.
So can we go back to May now, so everybody has all those dates?
Yep.
So May
Great.
30th, we didn't talk about in terms of the public kickoff meeting.
Right. We had that scheduled for 4. And a location to be determined. Where do you, in terms of potential participants coming for that, is this room large enough to do it, or?
The library is.
So the thing about this room is I can video it,
Yeah, we can
so
televise
that's
it.
the big benefit.
Right.
Otherwise, we could go to the school if we think it's, like, I was talking about, do we wanna do the visioning session in July at the school? Cause if we could break people out, if we're gonna get a large crowd.
I think the school for the visioning session would, because needing the tables to be able to spread out, I think.
But otherwise, the benefit is I can record things and play it here. So are we looking at May 30th
Yes.
and what's gonna happen at the public kickoff meeting, Bob?
Basically, what we're gonna wind up doing is presenting an overview of the property, an overview of some of the potential options for consideration, more or less showing precedents, village architecture, larger scale type projects that might fit into affordable senior housing as an example. Just trying to get some visionary images out there. Circulation, how pedestrian circulation may work. It's just really getting some stimulus out there to get people not to necessarily discuss it that night, but to start putting imagery in their heads. So when we actually go to that visioning session, there's something that, may trigger someone's thought process, that works with what I'm thinking should happen.
So
out
I
there,
think people are gonna want some outlet that
Yep.
evening as well.
No, we can do that. Introduce, give a, how long do we schedule that for?
You have an idea wall down as a suggestion.
Starts at, we have it shown here right now at 4, now whether that's adequate enough, or whether something like that you want to have later.
That's for May 30th?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, my sense is that you probably wanna bump that 4 to 6.
Yeah.
If you're gonna have a 4 o'clock start, but I would probably push that out to,
I mean, we
Push
have
that
the
to
room
6.
that night, so I think
Right.
if it's a public kickoff meeting, we would wanna do it later.
7 or 6:30?
I'm saying 6, 6:37, somewhere in there.
6.
Maybe 6,
The earlier the better.
so plan for
6 to 7?
6 to 8.
6 to 8? Okay. Let's see to my basket.
So can people be here on the 30th?
That one I can't, I'm out of town.
Okay.
I'll be out.
Here we go. So we'll have 2 missing.
So that one starts at 6.
But we'll take good note.
And you can watch it.
So let's just review. So we have May 21st for a meeting. May 30th is the public kickoff meeting in the evening. June 11th at 4. June 25th at 4. Saturday, July 13th in the morning is the visioning session. July 23rd at 4. August 6th at 4. August 20th at 4. And then we have September 17th at 6:30. And then October 10th or 17th for the selectmen.
24.
10th or 24th.
right, 10th or
I'm sorry,
24th.
October 10th or 24th.
So what was the 13th? What time was the kickoff?
9 AM.
9 AM, okay.
We're saying that it would actually start at 9 AM, the doors, probably we have coffee or something in the morning, starting at 8:30, just to get people in.
And that's the one that would be at the school?
That's be the one.
And the
Well,
May,
it's- yeah,
the May 25th first meeting would be at 5 PM.
Right.
May 25th,
May 21st at 5 PM.
5 PM.
And the only other thing is, when you started talking about the visioning session, the site walks, are we going to do public site walks prior to the public visioning session or the public kickoff meeting? What do people think? Is that necessary? Do you think just giving an overview of it
I
is
think the
enough?
overview, if you can, remember what you talked about,
Yeah.
condensing it and streamlining it.
Yeah.
So that they have that, I think that would be,
Adequate.
well, I think it would be more beneficial
Yeah.
than just went out there and standing,
Yeah.
and taking a walking.
I guess the question I'll ask is nothing that precludes anybody from the public walking out there if they wanna go look at it?
Yeah.
Right, take their map or whatever.
Yeah, I just think we want to clarify that since, since what we do, we've taken these documents, they're all on the website, they're all, so you all can access them, but everyone from the public can access them. We just want to be clear as
Go
far
back
as
and edit.
instructions on there,
Yeah.
that if we're saying site walk, that, folks are, if folks are gonna be on their own, we want them to know that they're on their own.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just want to make sure it's clear.
Okay.
So there's not gonna be anybody there to answer any questions?
Well,
On the
we
sidewalk.
could, but I don't know what that, wants to look like.
That's what we're asking. Do you think it's important? Do you want that to happen?
You asking me?
Yeah,
Question?
right,
Yeah.
I'd like to see somebody there.
Okay.
Because you know they'll have some questions when you see all the visual and everything.
Yeah.
So
well, and that's the thing, so practically speaking, if you're doing 6 to 8, that's 6 to 8 in here. And if you've got folks walking the site, so do we wanna have, do we wanna advertise, the site walk at, 4 to 6?
Well, I guess the question I'll ask is, we discussed this way back in terms of doing a public site walk, whether you'd bust them through, or if they're gonna park and walk. If you're gonna park and walk, it's gonna be
Right,
more time consuming.
that's right.
It is.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying a 4 to 6 if you're going to have an actual walk,
Yeah.
public site walk that you walk a group through.
But don't you think you'd want that? I would think that you'd want.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
walk-through
absolutely.
Versus a bus.
Right,
you know?
oh, yeah, no, yeah.
Don't you
And
I
think
know
you-
it's more
What
time
day were you
consuming,
looking
but-
at for that? We were saying later than, prior to the kickoff.
Yeah, I think prior to the
Yeah.
kickoff.
Oh,
I think that makes the most sense, is that, folks have a chance if they want to, they can walk the property, and then, you get into the discussion that happens in here between 6 to 8, afterwards, so.
I think it would be most helpful for anybody doing the sidewalk to have seen some of the baseline information. So in order to, when you advertise the
Yep.
sidewalk, make sure that they go online and,
Yeah, and
you know,
look at all the
Look at
information.
the map,
Yep.
because to do the sidewalk without any notion of what the site's really like.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
the
I
other
know.
thing is, we could do the public kickoff meeting, give people general information, and do the site walks prior to the public visioning session.
I would
Or we
suggest,
could
yeah,
do
it seems
that.
maybe
Yep.
there would be some thought to, have the public kickoff and say, and for folks that also want to go see it, but people may have enough from that, and then they can also tell them they're free to do a self-service site walk with the maps and the information they now have, but that we will be doing one that's kind of led at another time, but I don't know that it's that useful to people before they've even come into the kickoff meeting. You're not even sure yet what to be thinking about when
Yeah.
you're walking it.
I mean, you may have a few people that have a preconceived idea and they'd walk it early, but
Yeah.
others, it may set a wrong tone in one sense of just walking out through there, not knowing where they are on the face of the earth. I mean, even if you give them a plan, they start walking it and they're gonna stay right where it's cleared and not necessarily be able to figure out where they are.
What do
so.
we think of just site walks on Friday, July 12th?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I like that.
yeah.
Or it's up to you guys, we'll just,
I think that'd be good right before the public session, yeah.
so we could certainly let people after, between public kickoff, so May 3rd, so you got the month of June. You can go out there on your own, take your maps. And then if you want a more guided version, we could do something on Friday, July 12th.
Laura, are there any images such as this image available to the public at the website? The
Yes.
town's website? So are they being directed to that if they look? Or they got is this a hunt and peck, or it's obvious, it's easy?
Well, I mean, so what we have on the web right now is just the committee has a, has a section on the website, and that's where all these documents are. Now, in all fairness, yeah, you've got to look for it.
Okay.
And we're working through as
Yeah,
far as
yeah.
how we make that more accessible than the way, the way it's
If we
set
do
up
it-
now.
Is
You
this
do a good
particular
image.
image on the website?
Yes,
And
I
but
would've
at that
argued not to
scale
do
only,
that.
right? Like that's,
Not to put in the
Yeah.
cul-de-sacs and all
Yeah.
that.
yep. Well, and we can modify that. I mean, it's easily, if
Oh,
we
yeah.
want to take some of these, some of these documents are gonna get modified anyways.
Right. Yeah.
And so as we get modified versions of them, we'll pull the older versions down and replace. That's not a problem.
Yeah. Because we'll modify this to Mike's point, being able to have a better perspective of what is developable areas on the site and break it down by area.
right, my thought was if you let people know ahead of time that there is an image of the site that
Yeah.
you're going to walk on the 30th, please look at it ahead of time.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
you could direct
Yeah.
people to that.
Well, and what's easily done is that if we're sending that out as an email,
Yeah.
just just put the link to that exact document. That can be done. So
Maybe that's the kind of information too, Lori, that could go out in your tax notice, more of kind of a schedule, of here's all the things that are going on, where we're getting public input, here's where you can find maps, so that people are getting kind of a primer on
The other thing is we'll be
what you
sending,
need to know.
the taxes
in
won't go
April.
out until after these
Yeah.
dates.
Oh,
But, I mean, if we felt it was important enough, we could send out a separate notice. I would just like to make
Oh,
sure we have our
because
act together.
Right.
So when we send, we
Are
send
we not, we're
once,
doing the
you know.
site walk in July, right?
Right,
Yeah.
well, that's
The
what we're
other-
talking about.
And
Right.
and the public visioning is not until July 13th.
Right.
But, yeah.
yeah, so if we have now I think it's just a matter of what would that time, what would the time be on July 12th?
Yeah, what is the time?
Yeah.
4 to 6?
Yeah, 4 to 6.
I think, the other thing is if you're coming in for the weekend, you could come in a little early,
Yeah.
being a Friday night. We could even do like 3 to 6 or something too, if we thought we needed more time, but 4 to 6 sounds good. So the website, how you get to the information is you go under boards and committees and you pick the Village Parcel Steering Committee. And that takes you to the web page, and then there are links on the page. So we can, I am told, put a shorter URL for that page, behind the scenes, so that if you type in blankety blank, it'll go right to that page. So that was a question that Bob's team had was, what's the terminology we want to use for this site? Or is there a short name you think people are calling it that we could go to, or what your thoughts are?
I noticed there was a name here, Kennebunkport Crossroads.
Well, we tossed that name
that
out
the name-
only
is that the first
when I
name
think it
you
was
had?
Jamie who said, the property's like island in the stream.
Yeah.
Just trying to come up, so we just threw a name out there for people so we
Sure.
could discuss what would be a name that you think
Ah,
people would
okay,
catch
it's like a
on to.
placeholder name.
Right, that's
Yeah.
all. So, unfortunately, I guess, when I do something like that, I keep forgetting it goes up on public and then everybody sees it and
Yeah.
thinks that's the committed one. So, but it was more or less for point of discussion, if we want, or just keep it the village parcel.
People call it that property to me. That property,
Yeah.
that property we bought. So I haven't heard another name, besides the Village Parcel. I always tell people it's the Village Parcel, it's the Village Parcel. But I haven't heard another name that people have used, or that there's some historical reference point that people think of it as. Some people say the CDMK property,
Or the Frank.
or the Frink property, yeah.
I think the village property indicates that it might be more central into a village and not into free enterprise. So just because we have a zone that's called village, I think I'd stay away from that.
So what would we like to call it, that people can find it and know it as?
Well, Crossroads is an interesting name, but not so much literally, because it's not a crossroads. You know, it's not an intersectional road, but figuratively, you know, the town at a crossroads. You know, it's
The
an
road is
inflection
crossing
point.
from one
Yeah,
to
I
the
know,
other.
but it normally means an intersection. But figuratively, I think it's probably an interesting name, whether the town would, you know, whether everyone would embrace it that way.
Yeah.
Am I the only one that, I mean, there's a addiction rehab program
yes.
in
If-
town
Yes,
that's
there is.
statewide. and there's-
Yeah.
I mean, that was the first thing that came to
Yeah.
my
That's
mind when I saw it was, I think of that as the
If you do a Google
Crossroads
search on
Center.
those two words, that's what comes up.
Yeah,
So another
So-
name is probably more
I would
appropriate.
think maybe another one might
We used to call it cedar muck.
Yeah, that's right.
Cedar muck.
Yeah. I think if we're trying to have a name that people can search for, you know, a shorter name would be good, so that they can remember it.
Visionary property.
The
Town-
vision, yeah, something that's, you know, kind of aspirational or, you know.
As long as we can continue to be called the village people.
Yeah.
That was very good.
Just seemed to fit.
Yeah, it was great.
So we're gonna work on that, a name.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense if folks, you know, wanna think about that,
Yeah.
and toss
Yeah,
around
don't
some
have to have
ideas, you know.
Right.
Well, we're gonna wanna
Parcel
get your
works for me.
webpage
Yeah. I don't think we
formatted
We don't have to figure
more
that
than
out
just the way it
tonight.
is right now, so we can start getting additional information uploaded and whatnot, so.
Right.
I know Kara's been working with Lisa to try and get some of that stuff formatted, so.
Yeah, so I know there's a lot of technical questions about some of the, questions that Kara had and Lisa had, so what I'd like to suggest is that, you know, maybe, that your team and Lori and I, that we do a conference call to
Yeah.
work out some of those technical details and
Yeah.
questions that, instead of,
I'll probably have Kara do that,
Yeah,
only because she's
that-
the one
that's fine.
coordinating that
Yeah.
element, so.
yeah, there's just different elements with who we need to talk to, whether we're dealing with virtual town hall or whether we're, so
I mean, there are limitations.
there are
to how we can
limitations to it.
format
Right.
And some of those we might just, we may not be able to meet,
Yeah,
but.
we can do that.
yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
so what do we still need to accomplish today?
Well, I was just gonna walk you through that when we had the last walk in terms of trying to identify context of the property and what it relates to. So basically what we did is, hello. Someone's phone?
There's action needed.
Mr. Daggett's family property's back over here, roughly, we grabbed from the tax map information we had when we took this project through, so we were able to grab some stuff, but basically, that portion there, then we had Foxbury Woods over in here, then there was Shawmut Woods here, this is all the McCabe property, and then Wallace Woods, although we didn't get the other line on there, we thought we had, and then the Weintraub property, Bishop's Woods, then Cape Arundel Golf Course. And then we just in terms of distances, from the North Street entrance, it just shows you what a quarter of a mile would be, and then half a mile, plus the image down below, half a mile, a quarter mile takes you just about to, the intersection, this North Street is in here, and there's the bridge. So the quarter mile would take you up over into Kennebunk. And then from the School Street end, the map does show it out further, so it gives you an idea what that quarter mile, half mile radius is in terms of relationship to the school, as far as walking distance would be. So, yeah, there's Bailey Court, so, and there's the school. So ideally, a short line right down through the power lines would get you there. And what we'll do is we can take this one and manipulate it so that it clearly defines, where potential development portions of the property are.
And the Wallace Woods is the only abutter that's strictly on the village zoning, right?
In the village zoning?
Yeah.
Well, part of Weintraub's is.
But I mean, part, yeah, but.
Yeah. But I mean, entirely.
They're the only
yeah,
exclusive.
They're the only exclusive. yeah.
McCabe
McCabe
Is this
does
all
both,
village?
Right?
yeah, McCabe,
This is all village residential?
yes, I believe so. I think he's all in,
Oh.
he's all in VR. It actually, it splits,
It's a very bizarre thing.
So you're not on a mic, Werner.
Sorry.
If you upgrade the map, can you be sure those lines are in there, Warner?
Yeah, we can do that. We can put in a zone,
Yeah, put it
the
in.
zone district. Yeah, here, I'll borrow your thing for a minute.
Yeah.
Can you show also where the water and sewer end and begin?
So I believe where the zone line splits down through is on, I'm looking for Buttonwood.
I think that's,
Yep, Buttonwood. I think it cuts across. It comes down and it does this odd cut across and comes down Buttonwood.
Okay, yeah.
So, yeah, so as far as just, for context while we're here, so, water and sewer come up or stub to this location here. But there's no town water, or sewer along this particular stretch and through here. There is sewer and water in the Magnolia neighborhood, not for all of, well, it's all on water, but not all of it is on sewer. And then I believe water
Yep.
and somewhere right around, at the intersection there at Old Cape. Doesn't go up any further here.
so we'll get that updated. So we can get that posted, so we'll get the zoning on there and usable land area.
Is there anything else that we need to cover?
I think we've hit it all.
I'm gonna ask the public then, if they have any comments or questions. If you do, please come up and take this. Okay, thank you.
Introduce yourself.
I'm Dr. Nicholas Phillips. Moved here 3 years ago. Bought land, built a house in Wallace Woods. That dotted line goes right on my backyard that I didn't know was going to occur. So I have a real vested interest in what goes on at that end of the property, as do other people in that brand-new neighborhood that was just built. If nothing else comes from my efforts to talk to or persuade this committee in any way, we all want that road moved. The one that comes right up on the white dotted line should be over,
Should be what?
moved.
Move north. When
So move it to
you
the
bought your
east.
property, was CDMK already in motion?
No. As my house was being built, as it was being put up, all of a sudden this road got ripped up behind my house. And I said, "What's that?" Everybody's like, "Oh, gee, we don't know." Because we had a Moody's from Wells build our house. Our realtor didn't tell us. Everybody, I talked to people, I work at UNE. So I said, "What's going on?" "Oh, they've been talking about that for 20 years, about building a road. They said it would never happen." And there it is.
'Cause they
And I
bought the
remember you
property-
asked me when I talked about the committee, what don't I want there? That was your exact thing. I don't want noise, and I don't want traffic.
I don't blame you.
That's all.
If water and sewer were there, would you hook up?
We have water and sewer.
Good.
We're
All right.
hooked up.
Yeah, the line was extended out there.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
We all live here. We're all full-timers. Like I said, as I look at that map, my blood just boils. And
Were you aware that, it's already had been approved for 87 units, already for 87?
No.
Yeah.
No,
That's
not at
been
all.
on the books for,
Quite a
2009.
few years.
a number, it's long before you moved in, let's put it that way.
How would I know that?
Your
Well,
realtor should have
Your
known
realtor
that.
should have told you.
Your broker.
Your broker.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's all deeded, I mean, it's all recorded deed. isn't
That's
it?
been going on for over 10
By the
years,
developer.
Uh-huh.
that particular process.
That's interesting. Okay, well,
And I don't see there being a lot
That's all I
of
have to say.
traffic. I mean, as I'm looking there, if anything, if we did put in a few homes, you're only talking, 4 or 5 families.
Where are the homes?
We don't know yet, that's just it.
And you'd mentioned that some of it was residential and some of it was what, commercial?
Yeah,
And what's the
basically.
distinction?
No, so the way that the boundary works, so where the CMP right-of-way is essentially a zone boundary, okay? So, yep.
Zone line falls here.
So.
This is village residential.
So under current zoning, so in a village residential area, I mean, that zone, what you see in there in the table of uses is primarily residential uses, within that, that portion of the property. Then, once you get on the other side of the CMP right-of-way there, that's located in the free enterprise zone, which is a mixed-use zone, so you have a lot more, commercial and residential uses that can occur within that zone.
Okay, well, I'm really interested in what you plan on doing with the property. I'll be at a lot of the meetings. I'll be at a lot of the meetings, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I just jump in on this comment quickly? With just having just been on the site walk and the mention of traffic, I would just throw out there that if we do have the road as a crossroad through, I think we will see a lot more traffic than we are currently anticipating. Just knowing what it's like going through town in the busy season.
In the summer.
And having that opportunity to cut through, I think will be taken advantage of, so. I know there's a lot of other property owners in Shawmut Woods who are also concerned about that piece of it, including myself.
You done?
I'm done, thank you.
Okay.
Name.
What?
State your name.
Harrison Small. With the plan that there is in there now, when it was first developed, how wide a road did they have planned out?
It was 22 feet wide. The road width was 22 feet. No, I take that back. We went to 20. I take that back. We went to 20.
20-foot paved.
20
Now,
foot
is that
paved.
going to include sidewalks?
There would be a sidewalk on one side. There had been approved with a sidewalk on one side. So you would have had the additional 6 feet. So overall paved width between roadway and sidewalk, you'd have been looking at 26.
Is this going to be one-way traffic from one side to the other? Because that width road there, unless you have some real good shoulders built up, somebody's going off the side.
That's the same width as North Street.
Well, North Street was put in many years before, say, the size of a fire truck, ladder truck.
Basically, you're not getting into the full design of the road right now. This is more or less at the master planning level to determine what and how the property can be used. The roadway would have to meet the town's standards anyway in terms of requirements for width. There was a reduction in this width because it was going to be a private road and not a town road. So, but there's adequate room, and the way the whole thing was graded, you would have to grade it to meet the town's engineering standards. So when that was developed, those issues would be all addressed. But that's way down the line.
Yeah, but it's something that has to be thought about as you start going. Before you tell somebody that, okay, you can have a house lot here, and then pretty soon, we gotta take some of that because we gotta widen the road up. Now, how about
The right-of-way
Saudi
width is defined.
cul-de-sacs? I know in Wallace Woods there, towns had a very hard time when it comes to plowing. So I hope that in this, that in the beginning, they get it set up with the help of the town, maybe a truck with a plow and wing on it goes in there and said, this is gonna be wider, so we can't go in there and plow it.
Maybe you could just talk about the difference between the right-of-way
Yeah.
width and the paved and,
The right-of-way width is 50 feet, which is a standard requirement for roadway design unless you're an industrial park. The width of the travel lane has to fall within the center. So you're basically looking at a 25-foot cross-section from center line. So in this case, it was a 20-foot wide road, you had 10 feet on either side of the center line, and then you had that additional 15 feet to work with to do your grading. The way the grades work through there, you did not have the fall away, with the exception of about 4 different locations. And those locations had either guardrail designed into them, you know. So it's something, you know, I guess part of it is you're looking at a layout that was done for a prior development that is part of a foundation that's there now, that isn't necessarily going to be the full design of what the master plan is going to come out with. But no matter which way the property's ever developed, it's gonna have to meet standard practices in town engineering requirements. So those issues are all relevant, as it would go through the planning board review anyway.
Because I know I was in there measuring there, and there was one place where I was from the edge of the roadway to one outcropping of ledge, is only 16 feet wide.
Well, that's
it's
because the
not
road hasn't
complete.
really been,
It's not finished.
it's not,
It's not complete yet.
that's just roughed in. So the ledge removal and stuff never took place.
Anything else? Anybody else? No? I guess not. Anything else to come before the board at all? No? Do I have a motion to,
Do you need anything else, Bob?
I think
No.
we've got enough to go on.
do I have a motion to close?
So moved.
First and second, all in favor? Thank you, guys.
Thank you. So we're gonna see everybody on
What was that date?
21st of May.
Here you go.
21. Yep, Tuesday.
Supposed to have a minute.